Good afternoon. I do run WAB, and you're thinking, what is WABE? What's WABE? WAB 90.1 FM, since you might live in the area. Check us out for NPR and PBS on Channel 30 and WAB.org for if you like your stuff digital. But
So
before
you're actually at a fundraiser.
yes, there's going to be a pledge drive.
If you pay $25, you'll get a tote bag.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, but so the reason I'm here is not to talk about that. I had the pleasure and the honor of working for Steve Koonin for 18 years here in Atlanta at both Coca-Cola and Turner, and he invited me to come around here and use my NPR voice and interview him today. No, so what you guys probably know, Steve's a lifetime Atlantan, a native. You probably know that he's worked at 3 companies that are synonymous with Atlanta. Coca-Cola, Turner, and the Hawks, true to Atlanta. So you knew that already, I can tell. Great. Well, Steve, we're here at the Brand Innovators Conference. Let's start with a really important question. What's a strong brand to you?
To me, brand strength is all about relevance, and relevance put into really context. I love where the organizers have planned this meeting because this isn't only a strong brand, but you literally can look out the window and see it dimensionalized in so many different ways. And so the best brands and the way to grow a brand is by constantly creating context for your consumers, whether they're frequent, infrequent, to create that connection that you need.
Y'all may not know, but I really think Steve is a founding father of experiential marketing. Back in the 90s and the 2000s, he came up with some innovations from Coca-Cola and other places that were not just like breakthrough branding, they were also made the world a better place. So cool zones, how many people have been in a cool zone at a theme park, Disney, or yeah, that was Steve's work, as well as, voting booths, access here in Atlanta, we'll talk about it. But Steve, how do you find relevance, and is there something to be learned from the cool zone story about, I think you said something about fresh eyes. You always like to look with fresh eyes.
Yeah, so the only way you build context and relevance is with facts. Facts are the antidote for emotion. And when we came up with the ideas of Cool Zone, I was responsible for all the theme parks and movie theaters and sports venues for Coca-Cola. And so I believe a picture's worth 1,000 meetings. And so back in the day, everybody who worked in our department would get assigned a theme park. You were given a camera, you were given 100 rolls of film, and you went out and you saw and shot what was happening during the day. And then we sat in a conference room for 2 weeks and went through every single slide. And what we found were patterns. We found people were hiding out next to smelly trash receptacles because there was shade. We found that people couldn't find literally enough liquid refreshment to maintain their minimum hydration levels. And we found out that most people would kill for a beverage on a 100-degree day in Orlando, Florida, if they could find one. But to go from line for a ride to line to a concession stand made no sense to people. So they literally were punishing themselves. And so we took all of that information and created a hypothesis that Coca-Cola stands for one thing, and that's refreshment, mind, body, spirit. And we built these. If you've been to Phoenix, Arizona during the summer and you go to a restaurant, they have the misting stations. Cool zones were branded misting stations. It wasn't rocket science. But we put them in Six Flags, we put them in Disney, and we more than doubled our theme park segment of business because it put Coke's context and relevance front and center, where before it was just available. And Coke had a strategy. I know there's some Coca-Cola people here today that was brilliant of being within an arm's reach of desire, but that made sense in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now you got to create demand, and you got to satisfy demand, and that's what we were able to do.
I just remember being so inspired by the brand anthropology of all that, the photo safari. And this was back when you couldn't use your iPhone, right? It was real film. Yeah. And secondly, once you had the insight that, wow, people are sweaty, hot, and thirsty, they need to get the stuff, you brought brand narrative to the front where it wasn't just a utility, like let's cool off over there in that tent. Tell us about the storytelling.
Well, at Disney, we built human car washes, where it was when you got off the MGM ride, you would go through the human car wash and it would cool you down 15 degrees. And of course, there were banks of soft drink machines available for you. And everything had to be built into context. We actually built an attraction where it was a caveman found frozen in ice. I think it was Ice Station Cool.
That's it.
The Imagineers got a little carried away. And he was frozen reaching for a bottle of Coke. 4,300 years before it was developed, but go with it. And by the way, the consumer's very forgiving. If you're telling a story, you're creating mythology around them. So, I mean, we had a great time. We didn't do everything right. The first group we went to see was Six Flags, which were headquartered up in New York during the winter because we wanted to be in place for the summer. So I'll never forget Bob Pittman, who's now the chairman of iHeartRadio, was running Six Flags, and they had a big group, and we wanted to demonstrate this for him. So we invited him to a hotel ballroom at the plaza. We took over the entire ballroom, and we put these cool zones in, and we started misting. So when they walked in, it would be misting. We forgot that the sun is what causes the evaporation and the coolness. So by the time they walked in, there were about 3 inches of water in the carpet on the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, which cost Coke a pretty penny, I might add,
Ouch.
to clean that. But they got the idea. And from that idea, we ended up in 20 parks. And like I said, it was creating that context. Coke has a role at the theme park, but you have to dimensionalize it for people because nobody goes predisposed.
Excellent. And so you were in charge of all the sports and leisure sponsorships at Coke, and it was like $100 million budget when you added in the bottlers and stuff. How did you pay for cool zones? How did you do all this activation?
You know, you have to filter. You have to make hard choices. Not everything is the same value. I'd rather do 1 or 2 things brilliantly than 20 things mediocre. And that's what I said. Ubiquity is not a strategy. Volume of things you're doing aren't a good strategy, but become famous for one thing. Like, you know, at the Hawks, we're famous for basketball. Coke was famous for refreshment. And find things that can drive that. And it's okay. You know, it's okay if your competitor has things that they don't work for you, they're probably not going to work for them. So never buy defensively. Only go and do something and do a couple of things that really dimensionalize and drive your brand.
Yeah, that was bold when we killed certain things and pulled Coke out of certain things to pay for doubling down on. It was such impressive leadership by you. Another thing you talked about, awareness and ubiquity is really not the strategy. So sometimes I've heard you say, don't paint it red. We were at Coke. Paint it relevant.
Yeah, a huge sports fan. You might know that by what I do for a living now. It is, God damn, I hate sounding so old. Yeah, it was 1994. It's true. And it was the baseball strike. And ESPN had a game on of the Chattanooga Lookouts versus some team. And the broadcaster said, look at that Coke sign in center field. That baby's been here since 1928. And I had a stroke because television, radio, internet had been invented, all kinds of communication, but the same tactic was being used for almost 70 years. No change, no innovation. And I got a copy of that tape and I played it for the CEO and the board of the company and said, this isn't relevant. This is talking to ourselves. This isn't do a thing for the consumer to see a sign and hang those kind of signs. Now that I'm on this side, they're a very good thing.
We'll talk about it.
But you do that plus.
More on that later.
Not just that. Okay, I'm sorry.
That was good.
And so you kind of need to go create a revolution. You need a first shot. And that was the first shot. It wasn't me taking the shot. It was playing the shot that was taken. And so it allowed us permission to go do things and think differently than most companies had before.
And I know you went right to, what is the role of soft drinks at a baseball experience? So what is the role of soft drinks at a baseball experience?
Well, baseball and movie theaters, it's about ritual. And how do you create that ritual? How do you make it part? How do you get kids early on? We built kids meals, the first kids meals at movie theaters, and we used High C, which was one of our brands. But having a beverage and having a snack at an experience was super important and also very relevant, same message back to Coke.
Yeah.
And so how do you build that I wanted to make people uncomfortable if they didn't have a, a snack and a drink at a movie theater. Not physically uncomfortable, mentally, because it was such a part of the tradition. And so those are the kind of things that you use the tactics and use the screen and use the tools that are available to build that demand.
Fabulous. So when it comes to experiential brand innovations, I'm hearing fresh eyes, look for rituals that you can own and your brand can be a part of, be innovative, fresh and fresh creative. Let's change the subject a little bit and talk about your years at Turner. I was there too, and I know that you just constantly use the F word. It was so embarrassing. And what is your obsession with the F word?
The word she's talking about is focus.
Dirty minds you all had.
Right. If you say it really fast, it sounds like the other F word, but that's why I'll slow it down. It's focus. You have to have almost a religious focus on what you're trying to do, and you can't get distracted. And I learned that lesson over a long period of time, that there's no secret for any brand buried on an island under 15 feet of sand that you can go find and excavate. It's not treasure. You have to find it, you have to create it, you have to believe it, then you have to execute against it. And if you have conviction for what you are doing, and so the focus of being consistent in everything you communicated is how you build brands when products weren't brands.
Yeah, some of the parallels that could relate to people in this room is we were in a time when general entertainment was the big deal at cable. It was 2000. And it was about finding differentiation in a crowded field. And there was a lot of discussion about, do you focus or do you stay general? So I don't know how many people can relate to our business wants to stay broad. Our business wants to serve many, many clients. We want to own every segment. We want to own every quality in our category. Those are conversations that pretty much everybody runs into. And Steve and I fought that hard that if we picked a focus, we would be more famous and more successful. So it was a big strategic change going from general to focus.
Well, when you look at television networks, broadcast networks, the name broad's even in the title. And let's have something that appeals to everybody. But the reason they were able to be unseated is because they stood for nothing. So we had TBS and TNT, which were named for the creator. I don't mean that one, I mean Ted Turner. And the problem was History Channel had clear definition. If you're an ad buyer, you know what the History Channel is. You know what the Food Network is. You knew what ESPN was. We were alphabet soup. I think you called us conjoined twins.
Yes.
Because sometimes the programming would even bop between the two. And so we did a tremendous amount of research, and we realized that there were two very distinct audiences. People who like drama usually were women 35 plus, who wanted television that touched their hearts and mind, made them think and feel. It elicited emotion. They wanted to be touched emotionally. And that became TNT, We Know Drama. And then TBS was virtually the exact opposite. People did not want to be touched emotionally. They wanted to use comedy as a Prozac for when they got home. And if you think about what we had at TBS, The Office, Friends, Seinfeld, Raymond, those are the generators that got Netflix and all the streaming started, except they did it better than we did. They put every episode up with no commercials. Versus we'll tell you when you can watch it and load it full of commercials, which at the time was great. TBS and TNT usually were the top two networks along with USA on cable. So it was that maniacal focus. You don't run Shawshank Redemption on TBS, even though it's available. You don't run comedies on TNT. And that took us about 3 years to get into place because ad sales wanted, again, to be broad so they could create the most revenue. And we convinced them that if we have a very clearly defined audience, that has the most value to an advertiser because there's no waste. So let's go for focus. Let's go for the F word versus trying to be all things to all people and stand for nothing.
Yeah, and to this day, I know several strategic planners who use the TNT example of going from serving all segments, serving all content genres, and focusing and narrowing and actually growing ratings for 25 consecutive quarters to become the #1 network. So if you ever need to make the argument that focus pays off, Steve paved the way on that one.
We called it grow by shrinking.
Yeah.
Grow our business by shrinking our focus.
Now, there were also some pretty funny brand extensions and ways to get partners involved. One of my favorites, I don't know if you saw, I sent you the Kleenex tearjerker. That was funny.
Yeah, we would have you rate how many Kleenexes you needed to watch one of our drama movies.
Yeah.
And, you know, amplified that for consumers. And again, simple, easy, but relevant. When you cry, you're watching a movie on TV, it makes you cry, use a Kleenex. It's
Exactly.
better than your sleeve. That was going to be our tagline, but we decided not to do that.
All right, so you worked in global Coca-Cola advertising, national cable broadcasting, and now you're kind of in a hyper-local job. How do you like being in hyper-local?
I like not traveling.
Yeah, okay.
And I do love being able to celebrate our city because it's such an unusual, unique place. It is, you know, the cradle of the civil rights. It reflects diversity, I think, as good, if not better, than any other city in the world. And the passion that sports creates is kind of crazy to me still. You know, TBS and TNT were very, very popular. It was an $8 billion business. But they didn't have a section of the newspaper dedicated to them. They didn't have 4 broadcast channels who create programming in their news for it. They didn't have radio stations dedicated to it. Sports has this outside passion and coverage that is really quite remarkable. And sports as a platform is an amazing way to connect with consumers and fans. You know, in our very divided world, I think sports becomes the only thing that might actually unite us. Rarely are the vitriol, you know, around in a city, around a market, around a sports team versus a lot of other issues. And so I just couldn't believe, while, yeah, we were local and these were smaller companies and smaller business and revenue and what have you, the importance of them to the community was 100-fold of anything that I've ever experienced. I mean, again, Coke, incredible global brand, doesn't have a section of the newspaper dedicated to it every day, and now digital constantly. And so I think it's harnessing that power and using it can create great value for the brand and really drive the messaging that you want.
I remember you were thinking about a lot of different type of job opportunities at the time, and you had some good guiding principles why you wanted to, what you wanted to do next. Do you remember?
Well, I am a native Atlantan. I wanted to stay here. My family's been here almost 100 years, and I wanted to find a platform that I could help the city and contribute to change. And I think sports is better than any politician or policy in its ability to connect people. So, you know, when I got here, at my press conference, I said, our job is to excite, unite the city of Atlanta through Hawks basketball. And if I would change that after 8 years and would say, excite, unite, and uplift. And connecting with the community and uplifting the community. We actually, an hour before we got here, announced a Hawks Venture Fund that is going to focus $50 million on minority and women ventures, because 1.2% of all venture capital goes towards women and minority investments. So we want to create both capital access and use that platform that I just described. So everything we do, we're trying to create intentionality that not only builds our brand, but builds our community.
Seems like you're using fresh eyes again. I mean, you started this job 6 or 7 years ago. Which one?
8.
8. And I remember in this beginning, you went for the sports. You discovered the power of it for civics, and then you told me, "Oh my God, we're a community asset." That seems like a new frame for a sports team.
Yeah, it's rather amazing, again, of what you can do. In 2020, during the George Floyd protests, I was watching what was happening in downtown Atlanta, and literally the intersection of our building is right where all the protests were. And I love seeing the energy. I love seeing the young people. I love seeing the cause. What I didn't love was when it was over, it was over. There was no change. Nothing was going to change. And it struck me, and I believe it to the marrow of my bones, the only thing that changes anything in this country is voting. And so we were in the middle of COVID. We had a 700,000 square foot building sitting vacant. We had incredible technology and Wi-Fi. We're in the customer service business. We are next to a MARTA station. We own every parking lot around us. Why don't we have voting in our building? And called the Fulton County Commissioner, and they couldn't have said yes fast enough, because the average wait time in Atlanta for the primaries was 8.5 hours to vote, which is criminal because it takes a lot of people who physically can't endure that out. And by the second week of voting in the presidential election, our incredibly, insanely competitive staff had it down to 17 minutes. And 53,000 people voted in our building. We don't care who you voted for. And what I was so nervous about, this is starting in July, August, September. We had 3 elections, January. There was no vaccine. So I was asking literally our employees to sit across through a plexi shield, take driver's licenses when you would, you'd wear a hazmat suit to the grocery store. We didn't know, to come face to face with the population. And I was really worried. That's a big ask. And to a person, every employee said it was the most gratifying experience of their entire career because they got to see how important voting is to people. We saw a mom who became a naturalized citizen with her 18-year-old daughter, and it was the first time both of them voted. And their ballot was almost wringing wet. They were so emotional and crying when they fed it into the machine. We saw an 80-year-old African-American man who was on a walker saying, I never thought I'd ever have an opportunity to vote again because I can't stand in line at a library and be outside for that kind without, some kind of respite to sit down. And those were the kind of things that just filled your hearts and made you realize, man, we can do a lot. And the best thing to me was 71 other stadiums and arenas followed suit. And I think you'll see the same thing in 2024.
Yeah, I really wanted to hammer how you were the first arena and the first CEO of an arena to realize this potential service to the community and to reframe a for-profit entertainment, complex with a sports team into a community asset that really had an impact. So that's a brand innovator right there, I would say.
Thank you.
And one thing I've also been inspired with the Hawks is you did some pretty innovative segmentation and focusing on a totally new audience for some pro sports. So tell us, when I think pro sports, I still think about like golf sponsors and I don't know, a lot of white males who watch sports.
A lot of white males. Again, your market is your context.
Okay.
And in Atlanta, I had 40 plus years of empirical evidence that marketing to middle-aged, affluent white males wasn't the right segmentation, wasn't the right audience. Obviously, everybody's welcome. But in Atlanta, you can't make a living being people's second favorite team. The 53-year-old who got transferred by General Electric to Atlanta from Boston when you cut him, he bleeds Celtic green. He's coming to 2 Hawks games a year against the Celtics and wearing Celtics and screaming Celtics. But that's who we were trying to attract. And, you can't really convert that, but there was this massive next generation Atlantans of the guy from Boston's kids who were born here, who are now adults living here and want to make their own brand decisions in their life. So we targeted the first area, which was very unique, was diverse audiences and really leaned into the 50-50 diversity of Black, white in Atlanta. And I'll talk about Korean in a minute. And marketed to audiences who had never been marketed to and underserved, and then created environments where people would feel great and feel comfortable, and we bring people together. So next generation Atlantans and diversity. So 47% of our ticket buyers are now African American. And our average attendee is 34 years old, which is the youngest in sports in Atlanta by 20 years. Because of the messaging, the programming, we built spaces, not seats. We have extended the court and built a bar where you can stand and watch the game literally and feel the vibrations of the ball on the court, where it's seen and be seen. We actually did a piece of research. I don't think I've even told you about this. That blew my old man mind. 37% of people come to our games to see and be seen and enjoy the venue. TikTokers are buying front row seats and they are broadcasting the game with them calling the game on TikTok. We have people watching a Hawks game through an influencer's TikTok from all over the world. And they're not saying, pass into the middle, layup, rebound. They're talking about Two Chainz is 5 seats over, Quavo's over here, I'm wearing this. And if you go to a Hawks game, the elevated dress is stunning. It is a great night out. And we've leaned into that. Our chef is a James Beard Award winner that we brought on, said you can have 150 nights off versus working in a James Beard restaurant where you get 12 nights off in a year and raise your family. And so trying to understand that the consumer has so many choices that you just got to give them reason after reason after context to appreciate and enjoy your offering.
It's such a cool experience. And I noticed you really spend a lot of time with cultural relevance and inclusion. Like there are a lot of signals when you're at State Farm Arena that it's a happening place and you're welcome. What are some of your faves?
So again, being true to Atlanta, representing our city, Killer Mike, Run the Jewels, noted rapper, owns 4 barbershops in Atlanta called Swag Shops, shave, wash, and groom. We have a 4-tier barbershop that overlooks our court. Fantastic seats. You can get your haircut and watch the game. At 5:30, it's filled with players who are there before we open to the public, getting a little trim. And then about 6:30, it's filled with suburban kids who want to be cool. And they're selling $50 t-shirts in there, and they can't keep them in stock. But that was an homage because sports are the social lubricant in the Black barbershop. And we wanted people to recognize that we understand, appreciate, applaud, and honor it. And then across the way, there's a 20,000 square foot Zach Brown distillery and bar. Zach uses food as part of his hospitality. Instead of a meet and greet, he does eat and greets and has food trucks. And he was a chef. And we said to him, go crazy. And he did. And if you ever come into our building, you've never seen crystal chandeliers hanging. And he built every fixture, every piece of furniture in the menu. And it's our top concessions place, but it's literally chef quality, high quality food. But his Grammys are on display, his philanthropy is on display, because country music is also part of the heritage of Atlanta in the South.
Very nice. You're creating a lot of cool and special spaces across the city outside of the arena. Tell us about the spaces you've been creating.
So, as I said, we can only really be famous for basketball. So when I started, it was very obvious that all the focus was on selling stuff instead of building the brand organically. When Turner Broadcasting owned the Hawks many years ago, it was inexpensive programming. They would air a Hawks game and then re-air it. And, you know, it was cheap per hour to broadcast, but it never really created those emotional ties to the community. So we committed to go build courts throughout underserved parts of Atlanta. And again, I can sound fairly intelligent in retrospect, but when we started it, we really didn't understand what it would turn into. So we built 28 courts in underserved communities in Atlanta, and what those had become are literally like the town center in those communities. So when COVID hit and schools closed, it became very apparent very quickly that a lot of kids who got their nutrition and meals through schools would not have a way to get food. So we partnered with an amazing Atlanta company called Gooder, and we turned those 28 courts into pop-up grocery stores, and we fed the communities for free. And so fruits, vegetables, produce, dairy, and you could literally come from your house and come through and do 2 weeks of grocery shopping at a time. And then we had to pivot those part of that to senior delivery, who again weren't mobile, couldn't get through that. We did vaccinations at these courts. We do with our Emory medical partner. We do amazing, for example, Black History Month, we take a very different approach to. African-American men are 4 times more likely to get prostate cancer than Caucasian men. And so we dedicate Black History Month and all of our efforts on raising awareness for screenings for prostate cancer. And we do testing, we assist prostate cancer by giving money to every assist the Hawks team makes, again, famous for basketball. And whether it's assisting hunger or assisting prostate cancer, just to come up with something that has ties to facts and cultural relevance to help the community.
Yeah, that's really good insight too, that the 28 hubs serve as, your intelligence system and your anchor. That's really great.
We thought they were going to be basketball courts, and they became so much more. And then we partnered with State Farm, who came into our market. State Farm's like one of the top 10 employers in this market. Phoenix, Dallas, Atlanta, each have more than 10,000 employees. And so in our conversation with State Farm, they really don't need brand awareness. I think we all know who State Farm is and see lots of pretty damn good creative on who State Farm is. They might have to change their Aaron Rodgers commercials. But the conversation was them, how can we help make them an Atlanta company? And with 10,000 people and all the good they do, they were going to be one. We were just an accelerant for them. So wherever there's one of those courts, there's now a State Farm Good Neighbor Club. So we get with the community and say, what do you need? So one's a dance studio, one's an autism. I don't want to call it an autism center, but it's a place where autistic kids could come, and it has every tool they need to create sociability and a great environment for them to enjoy themselves. We have another one that's a computer lab and several that are recreational. So the State Farm Good Neighbor clubs reside next to the Hawks, courts. And that combination allows us to bring relevance to these communities that candidly probably will never buy a season ticket, but it allows us to connect. And one of the things that I've learned is big companies, most companies, are great at writing grants and writing checks, and thank God for them. They do amazing charity, but they're not nimble enough to get down granularly to really connect to citizens and people in communities. And that's what sports allows us to do. So, if we go do a clinic at one of our courts, we could have Papa John Pizza Truck to come for food afterwards, connect our partner, to the community.
That's great. So it's beyond awareness, and you are an instrument to help connect your partners to the community in an authentic way.
I've never really liked the expression 1 + 1 = 3. No, that's shitty math. 1 + 1 = 2. But it's a multiplier effect when you partner with a company. When you have a partner, you can literally multiply not only what you do and amplify what you do, but you also can create more dimensions to what you do.
Speaking of dimensions, you talked a lot about community service. What about climate and earth and environment? There must be a lot of pressure on you as a CEO of an arena.
Yeah. Actually, I know what you're talking about because we did talk about this. Our employees, I'm really kind of stunningly proud. Our arena employees wanted our building to be the first true green building in the world for sports or entertainment. And they took it upon themselves. And after every event, we hired people, and a lot of our senior arena execs stayed and sorted trash by hand. And literally, we are a zero waste facility, first in the world. And that created the opportunity to say, what else can we do? And then we started partnering. We have an incredible partner, Novalis, who you would not think a company whose main product is rolled aluminum. Now, they make soft drink cans, they make jet planes, the bodies of jet planes, they make Ford F-150 electric trucks, but they also make these really cool recyclable aluminum cups that we have in our building. But to put a consumer story on it, we have a QR code. You take a picture with your phone of the code, and you follow the life cycle of that cup, and that cup will be back in the arena in 35 days. You'll see it get smelted or melt. I'm Jewish. I have no idea what they do with it, but I've been told in 35 days it comes back to you. But again, organic, employee-driven, where they cared and wanted to start that. Now we've started a company with Fenway Sports and the Oakview Group that we're getting arenas all over the world, stadiums, to now become more sustainable, because the volume of trash and waste and landfill that can be diverted from our venues is massive, and it can make a change.
Phenomenal. Are there any questions out in the group? You guys want to tee up? It is past 4:30, and I know it's been time well spent.
Or hopefully it was.
Yes, sir.
This year? Y'all are taping this, right? I think we're 35 and 30. I think we're 34 and 35. Atlanta is starved for a winner. And I think it's, our product has to continue to compel people. We've had 30 sellouts in a row. It's a great experience, but I worry that, there's no guarantees in winning. My first year, we won 60 games, made the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time. I'm going, damn, this is easy. I better go find parade buses. No, not so easy. Winning in pro sports is unbelievably hard, and it's probably the single biggest variable is luck. And that's why we work so hard on this other stuff that we've talked about, because if your marketing plan is wins and losses, you have lost already. And so you better create something else and mean something else and have, I have this Venn diagram in my mind that building the strong brand, building an incredible experience, and where they intersect is if you have a great product, you're the Golden State Warriors. We want to be the Golden State Warriors, just called the Atlanta Hawks. But it's, and then the other thing I worry about, and all of you should be worried about it with brands, is what's happening with media, because it's not pretty. Media never was a democracy. We told you what to watch. We told you when you could watch it. And as soon as you were enjoying it, we shoved your commercial in it. And now that doesn't exist. And the one thing we did, we were a curator. You went to TBS or TNT or History Channel or NBC, you had a pretty good clue what was on. Today with streaming, for me, I never liked going to, does anybody here work for the Cheesecake Factory? Thank God. I never liked going because the menu was so big, I couldn't make up my mind. You're talking about focus. I can focus and make a decision in business like that. Cheesecake Factory, I'm paralyzed. I literally
Get the
wheeled
cheesecake.
me out. No, too much. And so I go to Netflix, and unless I'm looking for something specific, I literally am paralyzed. And I can't imagine that a lot of people are that different because you can't graze there. You don't run into things. There's no lead in. So all the principles that built television are going away. So for brands, for us, it's going to be a very different media world. So that's what I'm trying to think about.
Yes, sir.
So you have a tremendous amount of data. Device IDs, you know when people are in your building, purchase behavior, ticket purchases, et cetera. What are you guys doing from a data perspective to leverage that and drive incremental revenue to your business?
I would say significant part of our decisions are analytical driven, and that's both on the basketball side as well as on the business side. Like, for example, Atlanta is the 6th largest Korean market in the US. Did not know that. Did anybody know that?
I did not.
We have 13 K-pop shows this year, which is one of the fastest growing segments of music, because besides the sports piece that I talked about, the team, we're also the 3rd largest city or arena for music behind New York and LA, and 5th largest venue in the world in attendance for concerts. Part of it's geography. Can't get to Florida without going through Atlanta. Can't go west from north without going through Atlanta. So we benefited by the highway system. But this also is such a diverse city that between K-pop and hip hop, that's 30 more concerts than you would see in Charlotte, North Carolina, or Columbus, Ohio. And so having that analytics to understand what's working in music, what we have population-wise in Atlanta, and then going and creating the story and selling it to promoters and artists is a key piece. So we use data in virtually everything. And I just think we're touching the surface. I don't think we're very sophisticated yet, but I think in the future it will be everything. I'll give you a great example. We did this a couple of weeks for Valentine's Day. Anita Baker performed here on Valentine's Day. So I had a theory that men are stupid and lazy when it comes to buying their wife stuff for Valentine's Day. I have 38 years of empirical evidence right here. And so we came up with the idea is let's do a meal and a gift in one of our super fancy clubs and send it to people who bought tickets in the lower bowl and on the floor, to men who bought tickets for Anita Baker, and said, make Valentine's Day easy for you. Concert, dinner, gift. We sold out of 100 We only put 100 up for sale. We sold out, I think, in 3 minutes. You know, under the premise, men are stupid. That was intellectual data, not, you know. And now we have Mary J. Blige for Mother's Day. Hello? We'll
Yeah.
use that same insight. So whether it's data-driven or it's intuition, it really does drive decision-making.
I was just gonna ask, I think the final question, you guys ready to wrap this up, most folks? You want more questions? Should I take one more from the audience? Raise your hand if you want more question and answer. Okay, let's go to the lady in the back. Oh, great.
Well, we'll take those all day.
It's fabulous. That's swag. It's amazing.
That is, you made my day, and you get a new Porsche. Thank you, pick it up right out there. Good luck. Thank you. That's very, very kind. Thank you.
This side of
There
the
was a
room?
question over
Yep,
there.
yep.
So it's a great question. I'll tell you again an old man story. We sponsored the Coca-Cola 600 in Charlotte, North Carolina Memorial Day. And the objective of the Coca-Cola 600 was to drive 600 miles around a giant Coke logo in the middle of the infield. Okay. And then we asked people coming out, and there's a lot of alcohol involved that day too. Who sponsored the race you just watched? And DuPont was number one. Because DuPont was the car that Jeff Gordon drove to victory. And that was the day we learned that every sport's different. The passion in NASCAR, I would say in the NBA, is with the players. With NFL, it's with the team, with the shield. You're a Steelers fan, you don't care who's playing for the Steelers. You're a LeBron fan, you got a Cleveland jersey, a Miami jersey, and a Laker jersey, and God knows where he's going next jersey. And so I think that now that the players have become brands, Trae Young's Instagram read has more people following it than a Saturday night primetime NBA game on ABC. And so I do think that being part of the fabric of a player and a team and all the ancillary pieces are great for awareness, but you got to do something with it. You know, we used to have a saying, if you spend the money to buy the toys, you got to save money for the batteries. You have to do something with it. And so by, I think, connecting with players, being part of their uniform, part of who they are, part of their social media is really great, but then also connecting it to other pieces of your portfolio to drive your objectives. But I think it's what's happening. And again, it's back to the crumbling of media. Where is the focus? And I do think player uniforms are becoming a bigger piece. And in Europe, I mean, it's everything. You know, Ted Lasso exposed that. You know, even if you're not a EPL fan, you see it.
Shall we wrap? There is no one driving this except us. There's nobody saying 5 minutes.
You're not
Let's
being
get
held
out of here.
against your will.
Yeah. Between you and the bar, I feel so bad.
All right, well, let's let him go to the board. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Congrats. Thank you, Steve.